Well, hey, good Wednesday evening to you. How's everybody doing today? Of course, I am your happy host, Bill Sylvie, aka the Dungeon Delver. And joining us tonight is ostensibly the better part of the show, my lovely co-host from down under, the Ayatollah of rock and rolla, Lord Humongous, but you all know him as Kyle, the Viking at GM. How are you, Kyle? It's good to see you, my friend.
Good.
So, yesterday things kind of things kind of got pretty busy for me, pretty dynamic around Casa Sylvie. Let's just say you haven't lived until you've had a couple of days to bush hog, a barely working lawnmower, and a barely working 10-inch electric chainsaw to do it with. And we'll just leave it at that.
See, hand tools. You need to go like paleo hand tools.
Yeah, no, I'd still be working on tree number one. I'd still be working on tree number one. That wouldn't work. So I want to jump right into it because this is, I am calling this ostensibly game related, because one of the most curious things, it used to be up until, well, I would even say up into the early 2000s, getting a role-playing game, like a pen and paper role-playing game license, was actually really easy to do. If you think about it, think about the Star Wars property, and I don't care what you feel about the varying quality of the sequels and whatnot. But you know, what was West End Games? And they got the right to make a pen and paper RPG for Star Wars, and they had it for many years.
It was not a 300-person workplace with $10 million in capital.
Yeah. And yet Wizards of the Coast was, and they lost the license to make Star Wars role-playing game. It went over to Cubicle 7. So it's actually kind of back in the hands of a West End Games like affair. But the point that I'm making, and I promise I have one of the most curious licenses for tabletop games, and it's not a role-playing game, but I'm going to say it counts, is FASA made a Top Gun board game. You could buy a Top Gun board game, and it came with little tiny, and I mean tiny, I don't just mean tiny by like my old eyes that we were just talking about, tiny little plastic airplanes, and a hex board, and you could,
all right,
you know,
I don't want to play Goose.
You know, yeah, no kidding. Who does? So FASA had the Top Gun board game, and that is why I get to say this. I get to mention this funny thing, because whether you consider nostalgia a good thing or a bad thing, I would say that you and I are fairly nostalgic about the 80s, are we not, Kyle?
Yes, but nostalgia isn't what it used to be.
Nostalgia isn't what it used to be. So a new Top Gun movie just came out, which is kind of funny because there's a guy named Ward Carroll who has a great YouTube channel. He's a former F-14 driver, and he a few years ago, right after the sequel was announced, he did like 3 videos in a row that just shot him up in popularity. And it was from the perspective of someone who knew the jets and the technology and the terminology and the military very well, all the things wrong with Top Gun. But he still likes the movie. Yeah. And it was a great recruiting tool when it came out. Well,
I remember here, even in Australia, apparently every time they put the movie on TV, there'd be a little surge of recruitment, recruits appearing at Navy and Air Force recruiting stations. Even we don't have aircraft carriers or anything, and But
you used to. You guys had like 2 carriers as recently as the 1950s.
We had one.
You had one.
We had one. Oh. The HMS Melbourne, which was famous for it only ever sunk 2 other ships, both of them Allied.
Yeah, yeah. They like cut the bow off of a U.S. Destroyer or something.
Yeah. And then there was the HMAS Voyager that they ran into in Sydney Harbour. They weren't even like in the open seas. In the harbour.
That's like I'm sure this has happened to you, but like every once in a blue moon, I'll go to a mall, a strip mall, something with a big parking lot, and there'll be a car flipped over on its roof. It's in a parking lot. I just want to walk over and just, is everybody okay? Okay, what happened? Explain this to me.
For the last 8 or 10 years of its life, the thing, the catapults had broken, and they were too cheap to replace them, so they couldn't actually launch any aircraft. So they just used it as a troop carrier, and they carried troops to and from Vietnam. And then in the early 80s, the government was looking at replacing it, and they were going to buy a second-hand British one, because the British said, we won't need aircraft carriers anymore. We're not going to fight distant wars where we need air support. And then the Falklands War happened. So then the British decided to keep it instead. And Australia went, maybe we could buy from someone. Oh, nah.
Yeah. But anyway, so Top Gun nostalgia. So the new Top Gun came out, and it's apparently doing really gangbusters because people really want to see this movie, despite the fact that Tom Cruise would have been mandatorily retired out of the Navy, definitely out of flying. And Goose's son, who plays his counterpart in the movies, would be in his early 50s. If you go by how old he is, apparently in the film Top Gun. So this would not be like an 18-year-old kid and a 40-year-old fighter jock. This is like 2 old men. This is like if they made a fighter plane movie about you and me. But the thing that got me, the thing that tripped me up, was I saw a couple of articles, and it's internet rage click noise. We don't have to waste any electrons on this other than what I already am. I'm just mentioning it to laugh at it. There's been a few articles saying that what is it? And I should have like saved URLs, but they're basically like Top Gun is bad nostalgia because it tries to bring back an America that wasn't good for everybody. You know, that's the bad old jingoistic days of America, and is ginning up nostalgia for them. Well, you know what? It's eating everybody's lunch at the movie theaters. So apparently a lot of people want that simpler time back. And the thing about it is it's not set in the 80s. They don't have like a computer generated Ronald Reagan congratulating Maverick Mitchell. It's set in the now, like they fly F-35s and F-18 Super Hornets. So anyway, I just thought that was funny. Like the articles are like, "Ooh, no, you can't be nostalgic for the Reagan years." Oh.
Well, I think in general people like relatively simple stories, whether it be the US. I mean, you know, China's had its own that Operation Red Sea where they've got tanks doing adrift and stuff.
Yes,
that was a very simple story of, you know, the glorious People's Liberation Army that's going and fighting those evil terrorists who want to get a nuclear bomb, and rescuing a bunch of Chinese civilians along the way. You know, it's a pretty simple story, and apparently it was astoundingly popular in China. You know, people like these simple stories about their own countries. You know, some of us smaller countries like Australia, we have a little bit more angst about our jingoism. A little bit, you know, there was a movie Gallipoli where, you know, and then everyone dies at the end kind of thing. So some of us like that, but you know, any significant country, it's going to be like that. It's going to be our country, right or wrong, and you know, and everyone else is wrong anyway.
Yeah. Well, I gotta.
It's like we say, it's a popcorn movie. You don't go there and watch it on this 50-foot wide screen, with all your popcorn and Coke to, you're not doing a philosophy 303 class in existentialism or something.
Yeah, no. You're there, push button, receive endorphins.
Yeah.
Just for 2 hours, Hollywood puts their thumb right here, and that's fine. But by the way, you mentioned Gallipoli, and I just a quick aside, and then we'll get back on the highway, kids. Daddy just wants to see this roadside attraction. For our listeners out there, if you haven't seen Gallipoli, absolutely see it. But it is a heartbreaking movie. But it is very it is important to the Australia, New Zealand, the history of their militaries, and it has Mel Gibson in it. But don't expect Mad Max Mel Gibson or Lethal Weapon Mel Gibson. It is a fine movie, though.
Well, I like The Light Horseman. So that's about the British Empire war on the Turks, part of conquering Palestine, and they needed to take Beersheba because Beersheba was a stronghold and it was the only well. And they had sort of barely enough water for the men, but they didn't have enough water for all the horses. And it wasn't just, people forget, it wasn't just horses of cavalry and that, it was horse-drawn artillery and horse-drawn supply wagons and all the rest. So in order to carry on the war, they needed to capture Beersheba. And they tried a few straight-on infantry assaults, but they had to walk across like 2 miles of open ground being shot at. So that didn't work too well. And so the guy in charge of the light horse, and the role of light horse is not meant to be cavalry doing cavalry charge. It's meant to be, they use their horse to get quickly up to the front, then they dismount and then they go fight. But he said, we can just do a charge and we'll just take our bayonets off. And World War I bayonets, of course, were a short sword. So they charged in and they took Beersheba, and the Turks had been firing at them, but they fired high. They fired high because they were trying to aim at. They set their guns for infantry, 1,000 yards away, and then there were the cavalry 200 yards away. So the rounds just went over their heads pretty much. And they went and they took Beersheba. But there was a classic Aussie comment there, and what are we going to Beersheba for anyway? Well, one guy said, there's a well. And he said, well, we'd have to be bloody thirsty. So
right on. So speaking of media, and of course, we always come back to Dungeons and Dragons here on the show. For anybody who's going to ask me, no, I have not watched Stranger Things season 4, episode 1 yet. Everybody's raving about it. I'm going to watch it after the show tonight. You watch Stranger Things, Kyle?
I haven't yet. I've been too busy watching violent, murderous movies instead.
Oh, well, there's a good deal of violence and murder in Stranger Things. So far, my experience with Stranger Things is season 1 is really good. Season 2 is pretty good in the front half, but by the back half, it's kind of eh. And season 3 is very uneven. But in the overall, it's okay. From what I'm hearing, season 4 just hits it out of the park. So I will be actually engaged. Now, brace yourself, listeners. Tomorrow in the evening, probably, I will upload, not a live stream, although I will probably live stream tomorrow, but I will give you guys a video review of Stranger Things season 4, episode 1. And you really should check it out, Kyle. The whole series, the glue that binds it together as a show is classic Dungeons and Dragons. The Duffer Brothers are unashamed in their love of D&D and AD&D. It seeps from the pores of the show, and I wish more people would understand that. You haven't seen it, but a lot of times I tell folks, you've got to see Stranger Things. You've got to see Stranger Things. And I get a lot of pushback of, just, I'm not gonna be a consumer, but it's not like all the exciting stuff is going on in the front, and in the background you get a glimpse of some classic D&D book.
Mm-hmm.
The entire shows, the kids in the show outside of their D&D game are a D&D party. I mean, they really are. There's monsters, there's magic, yet it fits nicely into that sort of 80s conspiracy / horror movie vibe, like The Thing or Close Encounters of the Third Kind, The X-Files, and all that. And it's wrapped up in a delicious 1980s vibe that they don't hit you over the head with. It's not constantly like, hey, remember this thing from the 80s? Remember this thing from the 80s? Remember? It's just there. It's a world that we all knew. And as I've said before, the kids are now us. Those kids in the early 1980s in Stranger Things are 10 and 11 and 12 years old. So you do the math, they're now us. So please do. If you haven't seen it, whether you're my co-host or you're sitting out there in the audience, give it a watch. Do give it a watch. And Doomsword, I think this is an ideal time for you to take up that torch and sword and re-enter the Upside Down, because it is good. But and I was actually warned off of this by more than a few people. The Stranger Things D&D boxed set, don't bother with it. It does look like an old school basic red box D&D, but it is effectively an adventure game like Dungeon or something like that. It is D&D, but stripped down to the point you can't make characters and so on and etc. So,
right. So it's even worse than 5th Ed.
Yes, it is, and it's even more toxic because it tries to dovetail you into playing 5th Ed. So, as Vincent said, yes, it is a 5e thing.
Well, my poor son. Well, okay, so
my son
discovered that there was a D&D group led by a teacher at the school.
All right,
so he joined that, and they started up. And the first week. After the first 2 weeks, I asked him how it was going, and he said, "Oh, we're still making characters." And I said, "What?" And he said, "No, you don't just like roll the dice or something. You roll 6 dice and then throw away the worst and then assign the others." And I said, "I don't know." So he chose his character, and he's racing. "I'm a dragonborn," he said, and I didn't inquire whether that meant he's actually part dragon or just has some dragonly powers, like in Skyrim, he can do a shout or something. I don't know. I didn't inquire. And then his mate James was a half demon. So it means he's nice. As my son put it, he's nice to people half the time, and then he tortures people the other half of the time.
Yes, chaotic lawful.
Yeah. So eventually, in the third week, they had their first adventuring session. I said, "So now you got to the dungeon?" He goes, and he said, "Papa, this is 5th Ed. They don't have dungeons." And I said, "But it's in the title." What?
Physical distress that causes me actual physical pain to hear that.
So they're walking along long road for 4 days. And I said, "Didn't you just get bored and go off-road?" He goes, "No, it's a very wide road." Okay. So they're walking this long road for 4 days. I don't know who maintains the road, but anyway. And then they come to a fallen tree that's in their way on the road. And I said, "So you walk around it?" And he said, "No, it's a wide road." He said, "I don't know." And he just shrugged. Wide road and a very long tree. He said, "So So his friends James and Rudra started hacking into the tree to cut through it. And then the two two girls who were both playing sorcerers started chucking fire at it to burn through it. And then and he said, well, I'm a rogue, I'll just sneak under it. He said, because he said to the teacher, it's not completely flush with the road or anything, is it? And the teacher said, no. He said, okay, I'll sneak under it. So he snuck under it. He's waiting on the other side while the rest are going hack, 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 burn, burn, burn. And while they're hacking and burning, this wasp nest erupts and all these wasps come flying out. So James and Rudra are busily fighting the wasps, and the girls with their sorcerers say, can we befriend the wasps? And Zach says, there's a space under the tree. Just run away from them. Why do we need to fight them or befriend them? They won't have anything. There's no reason to. They won't. And so he just doesn't understand it.
Now, in fairness, in AD&D, they would have treasure type Q and be worth fighting, like Q times 10. So they would have had 10 to 40 gems in their lair.
It's quite possible. I don't know if 5th Ed has treasure type or whatever. Demlinks tells us Dragonborn are the Draconics from Dragonlance, but boring. Okay.
Wow, that sounds like just a suck hole of not fun.
Well, it's only lunchtimes, and they only get a brief lunch, and it's just lunchtimes, and it's probably difficult if you're the teacher running the game group because for primary school kids, because if you put in a lot of hack and slash, there'll probably be some parent who go, "Are you teaching my child to stab people?" So it would probably be difficult to do a traditional dungeon, given what a lot of parents are like. 4 out of the how many kids are there in there? I think there's 5. Yeah, so 4 out of the 5 might be delighted by it, but one might have some damp-eyed Nancy as a parent, and they just he has to tone it down and give them a big long road to walk or something. So
we were forbidden playing D&D and so forth when I was in middle school, 80s satanic panic. But speaking of schools and satanic panic, this is a fun thing. You actually sent me this link. It seems that the University of Adelaide does not want magic users on campus.
Yes.
So I've got this here. Let me do this thing. You guys don't have to see my handsome face. Occult Club registration rejected after complaint. It may summon Satan to University of Adelaide. Let me read on. Yeah, cookies. A club for pagans, witches, and Satanists said its affiliation with the Adelaide University Union has been rejected because of a complaint. Its members may summon the devil onto campus. Even if we did want to summon Satan, it's not against university or union policy to do so. So it's not really grounds to reject us. I say if they're high enough level to cast Gate, I want to see it. I don't care what Jew, Gentile, Muslim, Hindu. I want to watch that happen from a safe distance. The Adelaide University Occult Club was formed in late 2020 and provisionally registered with the Adelaide University Union in early 2021, but earlier this month an application for full registration was not approved. This, I wish so much that Dungeon Minister could have stayed. I really want his point of view on this. The club is now planning to appeal the decision of the All Clubs Committee to the union's board. However, the same conservative progress faction controls both bodies. Registration opens up funding for clubs as well as access to space and equipment at the university. I would imagine that they wouldn't have the equipment these guys would need anyway. We need chalk.
But the uni can pay for it. So that's the thing about being a university club. I mean, you don't need registration to sit in a pub and talk bollocks. Uni students have been doing that for generations without any official registration. You just need registration if you want the university to pay for it or provide a space for it.
So let's see. We've got the club is unaffiliated and now unable to meet on grounds. the complaint claimed that the club
they can meet, but they can't meet in the
right
in the rooms without paying for them and stuff.
So just sort of skimming over this. According to them, the complaint claimed the club wanted to summon Satan to the University of Adelaide and that occultists are always involved in criminal activity. Ashley said both contentions were untrue. They said they were unaware of any in the club believing in the literal Satan existing, and rituals were not part of the club's activities since its 30 members had such varying beliefs. And we have the club also organized an open letter signed by other club leaders supporting its registration. And a spokesperson said a motion to register the Occult Club failed because only 2 of the 4 club's committee's members voted, and motion requires 3 votes to be carried. When are we going to learn democracy doesn't work?
Feudal system, I tell you.
Exactly. It just kind of goes on. But guys, University of Adelaide, Kyle, if you know anyone who teaches there, anything like that, please communicate this message to them, because this is vital. This is important. If you take away witchcraft and occult clubs from university, skinny, awkward metalhead guys will never get laid. If you take away the pagan club, skinny, awkward metalhead guys will not know the touch of a woman or another man until well into their adult lives. So please, the dorks you save could be your own. I don't know what that means.
Well, related, there was a story of up in Queensland. There was some guy. He was up before the court. He was trying to get his Church of Satan recognized as an official religion. I don't know why, for non-profit status or something, to avoid taxes. And the judge was really scathing about it because he said, like, a religion requires a belief in some supreme being, and you have not presented to the court anyone who actually believes in Satan, actually believes he exists. As well, a religion requires some number of members. You claim 1,750 members. However, Facebook likes and following your page does not count as membership of a religion.
If it did, every man would be his own god.
Yeah. So the judge just scathingly tossed it out.
Oh my gosh! Just the idea, though. It's just.
Well, I think the key was the part there was the university student union being controlled by the conservative progress faction. Like it's capital P progress, but they're conservatives.
So once again, we have the chaotic lawfuls are in charge.
Yeah. So it must be some religious group, and they're frightened of losing some of their recruits to the Satanists.
Yeah. Now, I don't know my Australian geography, but is Adelaide in Queensland?
No. Okay. So, yeah. Well, anyone can look at Google Maps and see, but yeah, it's the other side of the country. Australia really, it looks like a continent, but really it's an archipelago. It's a series of island cities. City-states separated by seas of desert and occasional seas of wheat. So.
I look at Australia and I think this is like, what if God went to Bethesda Softworks and said, design a continent for me. Here you go. Some islands that are conveniently close enough to swim across, but you don't dare because they're full of predatory animals. Yeah. Just a few interesting cities with long spans of nothing between them.
Yeah, and even it's a howling wilderness.
Yeah,
like a lot of those games are.
I did think it was kind of funny in Mad Max Fury Road, which was a pretty good Mad Max movie. We can have an argument some other night, viewers and you and I, whatever, over whether or not it's a good movie or a bad movie. But I do think it's kind of funny. It's, expressed in deadly seriousness by Max to the brides that he's freed from Immortan Joe before the start of the the third act of the movie, when they say, well, we'll just keep going until we find the coast. And Max makes a comment, it's 80 days by motorcycle till you get to the sea in any direction. And I started thinking about that. 80 days. You give me a motorcycle and a reliable idea of whether it's cooking oil or homemade kerosene or distilled alcohol, whatever I'm going to put in the tank. It's not going to take me 80 days to get across the United States, much less across Australia. So what the F happened to the planet where the sea is now 5,000 miles in any given direction? Anyway. No, the reason I was asking about Adelaide and its location was I know you've mentioned that Queensland is kind of a rednecky place, if I may be so bold.
Yeah, well, it used to be, but in the recent election, they voted in a bunch of Greens members.
Aha! So, gentrification. Yeah. Well, pretty anyway, much, yeah. I was thinking, okay, if Adelaide is in Queensland and Queensland is the Alabama of Australia, then that would answer the whole question about why no, occult club in the university. But all that just falls apart because that's not the case. Vincent has a question. Let's see. Is there an issue with territorial predatory kangaroos in Australia?
Yeah, I've been trying to make the share thing work and answer his question with. There we go. Kangaroos can get predatorial, and some of the larger ones will get on their hind legs and have a go at you. So you do get guys having a fist fight with a roo. And the roos have got a nasty kick. You can search out videos on YouTube and stuff of the big reds. They kick the shit out of each other, really. It's nasty.
No, I can believe it. I can absolutely believe it because everything in Australia is designed to kill you. So, a little bit more salient, and I do want to answer this because it is vaguely gaming related. We all like a good post-apocalypse game. Post-apocalypse game. I don't want to live there. But Damien says, Max started out living in the middle of nowhere, Australia, before he headed out into the wasteland. Not true. Max was in one of the major cities located near the sea. Because when the Toe Cutter gang is seen in one of their more relaxed points of view, they're on a beach. They're on a beach in the same city where Max's police department is. And they're talking about going and killing Max's family. Then when Max and his wife and their son go on an extended vacation because he has to, he wants to clear his head out and not, decide whether or not he wants to keep being a main force patrolman. They go up the coast. They have the nice camper van with surfboards, so it's presumed that they got some waves in. So yes, Max does know. I mean, it's often forgotten because nowadays post-apocalyptic movies are kind of everything falls apart literally overnight. The opening scenes of The Last of Us, where it's on the radio and the TV about people suddenly being zombies and running around and that's often the scenario. But the original Mad Max movie was kind of a more slow collapse thing that, obviously the international situation had got a bit crappier. There was a war in the Middle East or something, making fuel prices just go nuts. So a lot of the infrastructure in Australia had fallen down because there wasn't the fuel and the vehicles to keep it going. So things had become more lawless. So police themselves had become more lawless.
and so on. There's more of a slow collapse, and then some months or years after this slow collapse starts, then nuclear bombs start flying around the world or whatever. But it's sort of more like, you could view it more that rather than just you're a first world country and then you get nuked and you're post-apocalyptic wasteland, you kind of go through the steps of being a first world country, then a second world country, then a third world country, and finally you become a wasteland. It's a slow descent over 20 or 30 years, or relatively anyway.
And that's the same with the original Dawn of the Dead. I mean, the remake of Dawn of the Dead, it's like, I woke up, my husband's a zombie. I'm going to run to the mall. Well, we have to leave the mall. Okay. And then we leave the mall for an extended chainsaw fight, and there's blood and everybody dies. And then there's like a 30-minute long credit sequence of them sailing out on a boat and then dying when they get to the place where they were taking the boat to, because it too was overrun with zombies. But in the original Dawn of the Dead, when the 3 survivors take their helicopter and landed on the Monroeville Mall, which I've been to, by the way, there in Pennsylvania, they watch TV. There's like still TV broadcasts and like political debates and stuff like that going on, and they're watching like news reports of the army trying to deal with the zombies and that sort of thing. But the more it goes on, the more dire and less organized news reports get. Like one of the last ones we see is just like some guy in the remains of a suit drinking from a bottle, just like arguing with another guy, and then later on, the next time we see them try the TV, it's just all snow. So in that zombie apocalypse, it was a slow, steady decline, not like everything was fine yesterday.
Like the Walking Dead, where he goes into a coma in hospital and wakes up a week or two later and everything's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think those sort of settings, they got a bit more thought in them about how things gradually fall apart. It's kind of the lazy option to just say, rocks fall, everyone dies, except for a small hardy group of survivors who then start fighting amongst themselves. I like it when there's a bit more thought into it. I mean, it doesn't have to make sense. Like, I think, fuel is really scarce. So what we're going to do is on our vehicle, we'll get the largest, most fuel inefficient vehicles we possibly can, load them up with armor and so on, so they're even less fuel efficient. And also we'll have a guy with a flaming guitar because fuel is scarce. Right. Water is scarce. When we're rationing it out to people, we're just going to pour it out on top of them. And they'll catch some of it, but most of it will just fall into the desert sand and then evaporate because water is scarce.
The only thing I'll say in defense of the water thing, and this is one of the things that you can't really use to defend bad screenwriting like you're talking about, but as a geek, you can kind of fall back on it to go, oh, okay, because when you go to see a movie, at least nowadays, they don't hand you. Like I remember seeing on eBay, and they still pop up from time to time, like playbills for movies all the way up into the mid 1970s. And there would be little addendums and discussions of characters' backgrounds, major motion pictures, big ones. But the Immortan Joe's Fortress actually had a huge artisanal well underneath it, which is why he was able to just it was the Immortan Joe sat on the water. You had a refinery that was still pulling oil out of the ground, providing gas, and then the Bullet Farmers. It was a lead smelting factory and an ammunition facility. So
but what I was going to say is it doesn't make sense, but you don't care. You're sitting there with your popcorn, and the guy being so wasteful is just glorious. It's gloriously wasteful. And it shows how rich and insane and murderous he is. Like he just doesn't care. Like there's that little scene where Lord Humongous comes up with his radio. He's in his BDSM gear, and he comes up with his handheld radio, and I want to have peace here, and we can talk, and the kid pops out of the hole in the ground and throws the bladed boomerang. And it hits some poor bugger in the head, and the guy's like, I'm going to kill him. And Humongous grabs him by the neck and puts him unconscious because he wants to continue talking.
Right.
And there's the other one where the guy, like, fling the boomerang, and the guy goes to catch it and it cuts his fingers off, and all his mates just laugh at him. It's like Lord Humongous just doesn't care. He's just... he's just this big muscular guy in his BDSM suit with his microphone, and he doesn't care because he's just gloriously evil.
Yes.
In that Thulsa Doom sort of way, gloriously over the top evil in a way that makes no sense whatsoever. He doesn't have an accounting book to plan out his use of gasoline over the next 12 months to make sure that there's none running out or whatever. He just doesn't care.
Right, exactly.
Like, how did Thulsa Doom feed all his recruits? All those thousands of people at the Mountain of Power. How did he feed them? It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. It's where did they go to the latrine? 1,000 people do a lot of shit every day. It's like, but nobody cares. We don't care because there's Thulsa Doom up there with his torch going, for 1,000 years I have watched you. Nobody cares.
Yeah, exactly. It's extremely poor concert planning, but awesome, empire building.
Doom had Soylent Green.
He did. Yeah, he had Soylent Green soup.
Split pea in hand.
Yeah. Yeah, you're wondering if they did anything to help that poor girl who Thulsa Doom made jump off the platform. We saw her like 4 scenes later in the orgy chamber. She was doing her part at the very last.
Giving yourself up. What was it? I think it was called The Rain. There was this insane Danish post-apocalyptic TV series where the rain itself is deadly. If you get hit by the raw rain, you go, you don't melt or whatever, but you die horribly of Ebola or some shit. And apparently you can collect it and it's perfectly safe to drink, or maybe you have to boil it or something, but just don't get caught out in the rain.
Okay.
And at one point they go to a household where everyone seems peaceful and nice and is wearing, like white shirts or white robes or something. There's a leader of the household, and it gives real kind of cult kind of vibes. And they're out gardening during the day, and the place is very well kept, and they managed to keep the raiders away somehow. And then it emerges that every month or so there's a lottery for which one of the members of the cult is going to give themselves up for the others to live. And they go off and get themselves butchered and cooked for the rest of the cult. And you're like, how is that sustainable? They'd have to have a steady stream of new recruits. Otherwise, they'd run out. There'd just be the cult leader left. And what's he do then? Cut off his own foot and eat it? I mean, it's like... But we don't care. We don't care. It's this crazy cult out in the woods and that. And eventually they run off and they kill 1 or 2 of them along the way, I think. I can't remember. But that's part of why we like post-apocalyptic settings. And fantasy and sci-fi settings, because it gives us the opportunity to have the insane cult leader with the cult and the setup that makes absolutely no sense, but it's cool. It's gloriously insane and evil, which is much more fun than ordinary mundane evil that we get in the real world.
Yeah, and I was. This gives me a chance to go on a polemic about how awful George R. Martin is. So thank you. When he has complained,
I'll sit here and eat my chocolate then.
Okay. When he has complained so vociferously about, how poor of a world builder J.R.R. Tolkien is, I want to know what Aragorn's tax plan will be. Well, no, you fucking don't. You fat beard. Nobody does. Nobody does. Nobody wants to know what Aragorn's tax plan is. You know what they want to know about Aragorn? They want to know that he rode to the Morannon, stood up to Sauron, and bought Frodo time to make it to Mount Doom. That's what people want to know about Aragorn because it's not that kind of story. I get it. You've written 16 boring books. The only non-boring parts being brothers and sisters making little spud babies that go on to be murderous dictators before they get poisoned by the what's his name, Peter Dinklage. But
no, it wasn't poisoned by Peter Dinklage. It was poisoned by the mother-in-law or something.
Oh yeah, okay.
Peter Dinklage was accused, but he wasn't guilty.
Oh, okay. But the point is, it's not important. It is truly not. If that is not the focus of the thing, I mean, epidemiology is fascinating. Viral pathology is fascinating. Microbiology, biomechanics, they are all amazing topics, and I could fall down a Wikipedia rabbit hole and tonight at 9:45 and wake up tomorrow, or rather go to bed tomorrow at 4 a.m, having consumed a couple of textbooks worth of this stuff. If I'm watching a zombie apocalypse movie, you don't need to take 90 of 120 minutes to walk me through that stuff.
Well, it's like you told me once about a Twilight 2000 game you ran where the players got hold of an Abrams tank, and then they started brewing their own ethanol to run the thing. And one of your players calculated how many acres of corn would be needed to be grown to keep the thing going.
Scotty,
it's like nobody cares, man.
Well, it's going to take this many days, and we're going to have to do this. And I've already run the numbers, and I'm like, could we maybe not just have a couple of running tank battles? Not everything has to be Saving Private Ryan. Sometimes it can be Rat Patrol and still be good.
Or Kelly's Heroes.
And Kelly's Heroes.
At no point did they have to refuel, or did they worry about how many rounds they had left? Granted, I mean, didn't those tanks only carry like 15 rounds or something?
No, they carried. What it was is later in the war. You did this, by the way, Kyle. Later in the war, hypervelocity tungsten armor-piercing rounds that could punch through Tiger tanks and Panther tanks. And yes, by the way, go educate yourselves, anyone out there in the audience, if you don't believe that Shermans could defeat Tigers and Panthers head on. Yes, they absolutely could. But those rounds were in extremely short supply. So you'd get like Smoke and Willie Pete, HE, and standard anti-tank rounds, which are just HEAT, but you might get like 9 armor-piercing rounds that you needed to really take on the
okay, but if you just need to blow up the bank door to get the gold out,
no,
well, you got the SS guy there for you anyway. So
yeah, yep.
But yeah, I mean, this little motley group, as they go along, they accumulate more and more people. This is which happened in another Clint Eastwood movie, in fact, one of his cowboy movies, when he goes along, and he's got, I can't remember who it is, and he ends up with like going along with the old American Indian guy, and then
the outlaw Josie Wales.
Yeah. He's like, oh, can I come along? And he's like, you may as well. Everyone else is.
Yeah.
As he goes along, he just accumulates more and more people.
Yes, that is a phenomenal movie. I really enjoyed it.
Kelly's Heroes is a bit like that too.
Mm-hmm.
At first, he just wants it to be himself and one like tank platoon, one tank or something, and then they end up with this whole train of guys going along. It needs more and more.
The General Carol O'Connor gets on the radio net and is listening to them talk to each other, and he thinks they're like just a unit that went rogue to spearhead an attack against the Nazis.
Yeah. Now, how realistic is that? Well, who cares? It's cool.
Who cares? It's cool.
And it would be an excellent RPG scenario.
Oh, yeah. That's somebody. There's a guy, and I can't remember his name, but at the drop of a suggestion, he regularly posts over on what's his name, Tarnowski on RPG site on his forums. But this dude will write a role-playing game about anything. I mean, he is just an RPG writing machine. I really wish he would release like a World War II role-playing. You could do it with Conflict, though, couldn't you?
Yeah,
you could do it.
I'd have to publish the vehicle rules as well, but
yes, vehicle rules, Kyle. Yes, you want to, Kyle.
I've got the vehicle rules. It's just I don't want to list all the vehicles, and then have people argue. No, it should have Category 2 armor, not Category 1. It's like it should be armor class 2, not armor class 1. Shut up! Go away. Make it whatever you like. But can we have a vehicle building system? It's like, no, leave me alone.
No, you may not invent your own tanks. It's funny. The two giant robot games, or there are two giant robot games, and I have great affection for them both. Heavy Gear and, of course, Mech Warrior. Out of the box, or BattleTech rather, out of the box, BattleTech is like, and here's how you make your own mechs. And of course, we as kids would be like, top movement speed of 20 kilometers an hour, but I've got like 7 auto cannons and 4 large lasers and, 100 tons of armor and just obscene and insane and ridiculous, nonsense and that sort of thing. Heavy Gear came out, and I remember the developers were talking to people in the giant robot community, and they had actually kicked around the idea of not including a construction system. And back then I was like, no, that's stupid. People are going to want to make their own mechs. That's like half the fun. But now, older that I am, no. Because if you can build it from the tiniest component, that means you have to sweat the tiniest component during battle. And but
the B&Gs love it. The B&Gs love it. The bit of the guy who wants to just sit at home with his spreadsheet. They're the ones that GURPS Vehicles was written for, and GURPS 4th edition generally. Every little detail, in the core rules, there's the advantage of having 2 heads and stuff, having an extra head.
Yeah.
Because, like so many players are going to do that for their character. I have 2 heads. I'm Zaphod Beeplebrox.
Corion's spreadsheet gaming is real gaming.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of people.
You say something that heinous again, and you're going to have to super chat it, Corion. I'm sorry. That's all there is to it. I'm not giving you the pulpit to do that again.
I think you've got to draw. I think you've got to draw limits, but at your game table. It's not necessarily other people's. One thing I wanted to mention was that my daughter at school has the kids are into Pokemon cards, and the funny thing is the ones in the junior grades don't actually play the game because the rules are too complicated for them. But they still like the cards because they're pretty and everything. And they go, oh, this one's got 3,000 energy. It could beat your one with 1,000 energy. And they swap them according to what's pretty. So first this message comes out from the school saying to us parents, teachers will not be adjudicating disputes between children over swapping of Pokemon cards. Because the kids will swap. And then 2 days later, they I want that back now. Argue with each other. In fact, my daughter was saying I saw her putting her wallet with her pocket money into her bag one day, and I'm like, why are you taking your wallet to school? And she said that there's another kid that said if she gave him $5, that he'd give her this card.
You got a Pokemon hustler at daycare. That's awesome.
Well, no, she's grade 1. Yeah,
grade 1. Sorry. Yeah. They grow up so fast, dude. I remember when. Oh my gosh.
And then next, I heard that the Monday afternoon assembly, all the children had been told that the grades prep to 3 were allowed to trade cards with each other, and the grades 4 to 6 were allowed to trade cards with each other. But the two streams couldn't mix because you have this 11-year-old trading cards with a 5-year-old going, hey kid, this is a really good one. And I said, so my response was, what is this? You're restraining the free market? It's regulatory. Too many regulations here. This is not good enough. I just felt myself possessed by the spirit of Ron Swanson. Let the children lose and learn.
This actually came up and was kind of a problem at Disney. Now, I don't know if this is. I have not been to Disney proper, like just to roam around the parks. Like my last couple of visits to Disney, because yes, it is just across town from me, folks. I do live in Disney World. But my last couple of visits was literally just kind of chauffeuring folks around to do things and having an overpriced dinner at a restaurant there. But back starting in the 90s, Disney pins were a big thing. And if you're not familiar, they're just like they're little tiny Claus in a movie posters or Claus in a Disney characters. And they're just nice. They're just sparkly things to wear on your lapel or your Disney t-shirt while you're on vacation. Well, Disney has made that kind of pin for a really long time, going back to like the 1920s. People have collected Disney pin-based memorabilia. And when Disney set up what they called pin trading stations, which are really just booths where you can buy more pins, but the people who man the booths have big sashes on, like Miss Universe, but they got pins on them, and they'll trade, like, a kid like just has a plain Mickey Mouse pin. Well, here's a Mickey Mouse with wizard hat pin. They always make sure to give him something bigger and better. Well, adult Disney fans, this was apparently a thing that was happening in Disney. Adult Disney fans, which is a creepy enough thing, would approach children, which is even more creepy, but offer to trade them pins. They would have their satchel full of pins or their sash full of pins. And they'd go up to kids, and if they'd see them wearing that pin from Disneyland from when it opened in 1950, and great grandpa bought it for 10 cents there, and the thing is worth a fucking mint, and it's pinned on Little Billy's Star Wars t-shirt now. It's like, ooh, can I trade you a Mickey Mouse Jedi pin for that?
A piece of chewed gum for that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, maybe there needs to be a special card for that. So here in Australia, there's a thing called a working with children check. So it's like a police check, but specifically for working with children, because people worried about people molesting their children and stuff. But it covers not only the obvious kind of sexual assault offences and the rest, but also things like if you're a psychologist who has sex with one of your patients and have been deregistered as a psychologist, you're not allowed to then go and run a childcare business They're like, no, you're just a scumbag. So it's called a working with children check. Perhaps we need a trading with children check.
Yeah. Well, Disney put the kibosh on it because, I mean, again, in Central Florida, and I mean, there are man babies and women babies too. Like, you know, if they can't fly budget, they'll drive if they're on this side of the Mississippi to Orlando to go to Disney like every other weekend or something crazy like that. So they kind of got nose. Disney intervened because there was more than one angry parent trying to track down these fat bodies who had basically ripped the kids off and said, you know, take your $2 pin and give me the $30 one back. So yeah,
I'm with Ron Swanson on this one. Just, you know, let them lose. You know, capitalism, God's way of distinguishing well-off people from the stupid. Sorting out the rich and that's. But all right, one of our viewers found the article about the guy who wanted to make his own, get the guy up in Queensland, the Satanist up in Queensland, and so Noosa Temple of Satan Education Challenge dismissed by judge as jumble of confected nonsense. A Supreme Court judge has dismissed a group of Satanists bid to teach religious classes in some Queensland schools. She wanted to teach Satanism in school, describing the case as a deplorable waste of state resources and a political stunt. The Noosa, and especially funny because it's Noosa. Noosa is like a resort town. It's like Bahamas or something. So the Noosa Temple of Satan last year launched action in the Supreme Court calling for a judicial review of the Queensland Education Department's determination that it was not a religious denomination or society. Their review followed the group's application to provide religious instruction at 2 high schools and 2 primary schools across Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast. On Friday, Justice Mutton Burns dismissed the temple's application and also made a direction the group founder Robin Bristow appear before him in 2 weeks to prove why he should not be prosecuted over his testimony. Not only are you wrong, you are so wrong you should be prosecuted for it.
What you have just said is not only wrong, but it's so unbelievably stupid that you have made everyone in this room dumber for it. Everything you've said.
So they wanted to have satanic religious instruction with the aims of providing students with information about the religion of Satanism and that Satan was a supernatural being. There was a public statement, most Satanists do not believe that Satan exists. Accordingly, the department considers there is a real question whether the temple's true purpose is political as opposed to religious. There is also limited evidence to demonstrate that the temple has sufficient membership in order to be regarded as a denomination or a society. Mr. Bristow responded that the temple was a religion that objects to Christian authoritarianism and could not sit back and watch the implementation of the bill. He argued there were no minimum numbers required for membership to qualify as a religious society. Like you said, Bill, a church of yourself. Group member Trevor Bell filed the court action with a series of supporting affidavits, in one of which Mr. Bristow claimed the group had more than 8,000 Facebook followers and likers. During cross-examination, Mr. Bristow told the court he uses his drag name, Brother Samuel Demogorgon, as it was the most demonic one he could find from a website. As late as May last year, Mr. Bristow told the court he was unsure he was a Satanist and now described himself as a non-theistic Satanist who participated in rituals but did not believe in Satan. Justice Burns wrote that during cross-examination, Mr. Bristow was referred to his affidavit where he stated that the supernatural belief in Satan that the temple aims to promote is the Satan of the Bible, which would be taught to students in religious instruction classes and chaplaincy services. It was put to Mr. Bristow that this was a false deposition, a proposition he attempted to deny, he wrote. When challenged on his denial, Mr. Bristow was unable to point to a single person, whether associated with the administration of the temple or otherwise, who holds to, or even once held, such a belief. Justice Burns pointed to part of the exchange. Applicant. If a member of the public had no interest in Satanism, could they be considered a member of the new temple of Satan? Bristow. I don't see why not. Here's a nice picture of him standing there with a black cloak and a very, very fake plastic skull next to the beach, dressed as Brother Samuel Demogorgon. In dismissing the temple's application, it was a religious denominational society. Justice Burns found the result of Mr. Bristow's attempt to meet legal criteria of religious organisation resulted in a jumble of confected nonsense. Apart from Mr. Bell and Mr. Bristow, only one other person, the graphic designer, was identified by the evidence as a member of the temple. Reliance on Facebook followers and page likers as members of the temple and therefore adherents is an absurd notion, Justice Burns wrote. Justice Burns found the temple had no genuine connection to anything pertaining to religion and certainly no evidence of a shared belief in a supernatural being, thing, or principle, let alone canons of conduct to give effect to such belief. So, you said it was a political stunt, basically, because they wanted to get...
Yeah, I mean, I figured as much. I mean, generally speaking, when you're talking about Satan worshipers, it's edgy atheists is what most people...
Yeah. But I like his face. Explain why you should not be prosecuted for messing us around so much. That's classic.
That's like getting a stern talking to from your old man, you know. Tell me why I shouldn't ground you. Tell me why I shouldn't take away your TV privileges for a week. God, TV privileges. If this wasn't a thing with you, I'm sure it was with some of the audience. Remember TV privileges as opposed to now kids carrying around a high definition television. Yeah. You can't sit in the living room and watch the Walter Cronkite Report with us on Sunday evening. Dang it. You guys suck. You know, it's like, go to your room. Awesome. That's where my PC, tablet, console, and phone are at.
Yeah, my son has told me about his friends who had to spend a week in isolation because they were COVID positive. And he said they weren't too upset because they just got to sit in their room and be on their Xbox for a week while their family slid meals under their door.
Yeah.
They weren't too worried. They missed their friends a bit, but that was it.
James Seymour drags us back on topic. Thank you, by the way, James. If I had a way to reverse super chat you for this, I would. How far away do you stray from AD&D your gaming? Is 1E canon, but 2E heresy? What about OSR versus original text?
2E. That's what I said.
2E. Well, I think
evil,
Kyle and
evil, war against evil. Malocchio, the Italians say. The evil eye.
Kyle and I probably very much share the same point of view with that. I will say that a tiny, tiny select number of Greyhawk items written by Jim Ward and Rob Kuntz for second edition are acceptable because they're working from knowledge of gaming with Gary. But rules to everything else, I give it a hard pass. As far as straying from AD&D, I mean, I don't. It's just it's 1E. 1E is my game up to a very gray area in Unearthed Arcana, but prior to that, AD&D all the way. OSR versus original text. If I can bring somebody to play AD&D by saying, "Yeah, Osric is cool. Sure, I'll play in your campaign where you're using Osric's rulebook," then that is absolutely what I'll do. And I know, and everybody else knows, an Osric module is just basically code for this is a 1E AD&D module.
Yeah, because think about where the OSR started. It started with the retro clones, right? What you did was, because you cannot copyright ideas. And there's also a thing called doctrine of merger, where if there's only so many ways to express a particular idea, you can't copyright that. You can't copyright the words and then play proceeds clockwise around the table, because there's so many games that do that, so you can't copyright that. So what people did was they wanted to write their own material for D&D or Traveller or whatever, so they did a retro clone. They rewrote the rules in their own words using the same ideas and the same, because you can't copyright strength. You can't copyright 3d6 and so on.
Right.
So they did that. So it's essentially the same. It's the same stuff, but with in different words, with different crappy artwork and set, So yeah. It's the same. It's fundamentally the same. Luther says, if one E went off a cliff, Bill would follow. It doesn't go off a cliff; it goes into a 20-foot pit.
That is correct. Fortunately, I'm third level with moderate to high hit points, so it won't kill me. Let's see. And then James with a follow-up. Are Arduin or Judges Guild acceptable? I have only ever skimmed Arduin. I know that Dave Hargrave took the typo %liar and ran with it in Arduin. That's one thing I know about it. Some of his monsters were a little too weird fantasy for my taste, but if someone was running AD&D and was using bits of Arduin, I wouldn't say no. JG stuff, ultimately depends on the DM. I wouldn't incorporate it into my game, but that's not have any particular malice towards it. I just didn't back in the day, so it doesn't factor on my radar. I know that JG danced a very perilous dance with TSR from a legal standpoint, because they tried to make their stuff as OD&D and then later AD&D compatible as possible. So with that said, I know that it's not going to break AD&D to put in JG products from that era, and a lot of people do love them some Judges Guild from that era. I just was not exposed to it back then, and very little now, and the little bit I had to part with for monetary reasons.
Well, my thing is, as I've expressed many times, I don't think system is that important. I think it's the least important. It's number one, people at the game table. It doesn't matter if you think of someone you hate, if Luther had to have me at the game table, he wouldn't have fun. It doesn't matter what the system or the setting or whatever it is. Number one is the people at the game table, and if you've got a bunch of great friends, you're going to have fun, even if you're playing World of Cinnabar or something. Number two, snacks. Food brings people together. There's a reason that, you go out with someone, you invite them to a dinner and a movie. You don't invite them just to a movie, because you'll be sitting there through the movie hungry, right?
Right.
And you go out for a coffee with somebody. You consume something. Somebody comes to your house and you sit them down, you offer them a drink or some food or something. And all the great religions, every religious festival is a feast. There might be some fasting along the way, like the Jewish people with Yom Kippur and Muslims with Ramadan. But each day or the month or whatever ends with a feast, right? A wedding has a feast. Even a funeral has a wake. It has food. So food brings people together. Yep. So snacks are the second importance. The next most important thing is a setting. If you have an engaging setting that people can get into, villains that you can hate, monsters that are monstrous, and and just interesting details in the setting without getting all kind of rabbinical on it and having to dig into all the details. So that the setting will next grasp people. The system is really dead last in all this. It doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. It just means that it's the least important of all these things. The examples that I've got that make me think of that is, as I was talking last week about my setting of Tuesday, and of how I run it with several different systems. I've run it with Fate, I've run it with Master, I've run it with GURPS, and I've run it with D&D, and it didn't really make any difference. Now, part of that's my particular GMing style, where I try to skate over the pointless details and go, yep, you can do it. It's like, do you make a roll to start a fire? Well, my view, I have an inclusive rather than exclusive view of skills. You don't need to roll to do something. The skill is to do something well or do it quickly. But most things anyone can do, given enough time, and as long as they're willing to do them badly. Having just finished regrouting the tiles in the bathroom a bit, we've got a good understanding of this in our household. We did it, but it took ages. It was miserable. It would have been better to pay someone. We just can't get people at the moment because there's a building boom and supply shortage and all the rest. But so you don't have to make a roll to do things, only to do them well or do them quickly. If you're willing to take hours to make your fire for your camp, whatever. So you don't make them roll for all this ends. And that keeps the game moving if you have that kind of assumption that they can just do things. And the second piece of evidence that made me think that I preferred simpler rather than more complex systems was that I was running a GURPS campaign at the same time as a friend was running a GURPS campaign. He started it out, and they started off in this cavern, and there were 6 players with 8 gargoyles there, and they took 3 sessions to fight them, and this was 18 combat rounds, which in GURPS means 18 seconds.
Oof.
They took 3 sessions, and it was 1 session every 2 weeks. So they took a total of about 10 hours and 6 weeks to do 18 seconds of combat, which just with the gargoyles in the intro cavern, let alone afterwards. And of course you get experience points. So you level up, you improve your skills and stuff between sessions. So like in the middle of a fight, they were leveling up and made it a bit Diablo-like, except a lot slower. Whereas I, at the same time, I was running a game which was set in the Roman Republic, a sort of a Marius and Sulla or Caesar and Mark Antony kind of scenario, that there's the Republic, but there are guys who are jockeying for power in the Republic and misusing the army to get it, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so the PCs were the clients of a patron senior guy in the Republic, and they're doing all these things. And they ended up fighting a battle that determined the fate of the Republic, whether it would continue being a Republic or become basically an empire. And we determined that battle in 20 minutes of game time. And I thought, how come like fighting 8 gargoyles takes them 3 sessions and 10 hours, and we can have a battle determining the entire fate of the Roman Republic in 20 minutes? And it was simply because I ignored most of the rules. And I thought, if I'm ignoring most of the rules, why have them? So after that campaign, I never used GURPS again. I never ran GURPS again. I like it, but most people can't run it really smoothly, or let alone play it really smoothly. So my philosophy is you have that simple game system, default to a simpler game system. And 1E is simpler than 2E. And that just seems to be the nature of game systems, just like it is for software and everything else. Each subsequent edition adds complexity. Nobody does this like 300-page first edition and then a 30-page second edition. It's the other way around. They add complexity. They add features because there's this. They start by having the features that 50 out of every 100 players want, and then the second edition covers 80 out of every 100 players, and then by the time the 3rd or 4th edition, you're talking about 1 in 1,000 players who give a damn about that particular thing. So they're trying to cover more and more thing in the hope of growing the audience of it. But then you look back at the history of games, and D&D was never more popular than in the early 80s. In the early 80s, in the times of First Ed. So I think there is an optimal level of complexity of a game. I mean, in the end, you can just do rock, paper, scissors for everything and just call your
Yeah, but then you're LARPing Vampire the Masquerade, and nobody wants that.
Exactly.
Horny
so
goths.
I think you might want a bit more complexity. I think you might want a bit more complexity than that. But yeah, it's like the saying that so I think role-playing game and its writing need to be like a woman's skirt, long enough to cover the basics, but short enough to be interesting.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. I will mention there's one game that I can think of, one game that actually went retrograde on rules complexity in a more advanced edition, like the 7th edition of Champions, Hero System rules. And this was for the Hero System crowd. This was a pretty tectonic shift. This was bigger than armor classes going from 0 is best to 10 is worst to 10 is best, 0 is worst, and beyond. The 7th edition of Hero jettisoned figured characteristics, where you've got like, body is like 2 characteristics divided by 2, but added together. Everything is bought. Everything is part of the points buy now in Hero System. They completely jettisoned it. Now, is that a complexity change of less complexity for people just coming to the game? Yes, it is. If you go back and say, I know we were playing 7th, I don't like it, we're going to go to 5th, that's a big sea change for them. But for older people, and let's be honest, 90% of people playing Hero System are people that have been playing Hero System for years and years and years. Nobody,
I don't know. I've never met a person who actually plays the Hero System. They have the books, but I've never met a person who plays.
I'm the same with GURPS. I've never met a person like face to face in person who plays GURPS. But
and even the only video I ever watched about Hero System was where a guy used 5th edition and he took it out into his backyard to see if it would stop a bullet, and it did. It stopped his 9mm.
Yeah, so if you take somebody who's been playing Hero System since 1983, whenever it first came in, it was like 83, I think, they may not grok a Hero System that doesn't have figured characteristics. That may take their hero that they've had for almost 40 years, and now they've got to like refigure a bunch of stuff. They've got to shuffle a bunch of stuff around. But so you could make the argument that becoming simpler does not necessarily simplify rules. Let's see. James is just bringing all the good questions tonight and keeping us on topic, and we appreciate it. Are we at peak D&D population? Do I see a plateau or decline? I see a decline. I see a slight decline until we reach the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons, which is coming in about 18 months, 15 to 18 months, I think. 2024 will be the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons. I think you'll see an uptick. We're probably experiencing an uptick right now because of the release of Stranger Things. Wizards is working to make a bastion around D&D that is merch centric. Selling D&D as a lifestyle brand. Buy the t-shirt, buy the coffee mug, go to GaryCon, go to Gen Con, wear a rainbow colored ampersand button, buy a D&D starter set, and play it 3 times and then put it on the shelf so it gathers dust, but keep buying dice and keep buying miniatures you'll never paint. That's what they're trying to build up. I think in preparation for a center collapse of a player base. I don't mean collapse like 1 month is 6 million, and then we roll over to the next year and it's like 750,000. I just mean a softening of it compared to what it's been since about 2014. So I think right now we're probably getting up here on the roller coaster, but pretty soon we're going to start doing this. That's my take.
I think it's hard to say, because what I saw in the last few years was a growing number of people doing D&D 5th Ed. I think they did a pretty damn good thing with their Adventurers League. It's pretty much what TSR tried to do decades ago with the Role Playing Gamers Association, where they would try to have tournament modules and hook people up with other gamers to play with and so on. And I think they seem to do that pretty damn well. When I went to the game store in the city, I'd always see groups playing, and they'd be young people from the local universities, and there were people of obviously very different backgrounds. So they did that pretty well. What hit that here in Australia was all the lockdown stuff, because the game stores, a lot of game stores closed, all the game clubs closed, but a lot of game stores closed as well. So there wasn't a place for them to meet. So there's still some stuff going online, but it's the same as the stuff here. The people who show up here in the gym show up more regularly compared to the people who do distance training with me. Just, I give them a program and they take a video of their lifts, and I comment on it and so on. There's a much bigger drop off in them. They're much more likely to just stop lifting. So I think the same is true of the online gaming, that people are much more likely to just ghost on your group one day compared to if they come around to your house or your game club and sit down and share cheezels with you. The transition to doing mostly online stuff, I think, hasn't really been good for them. It's my hope that it will build back up again as things open up and there's more. Because at the moment, even though things have opened up, there isn't a lot of confidence in the economy and that. People have got a high savings rate. They're a bit nervous. They're not sure what's going to happen next. So they're kind of holding back a little bit. And I think the same thing is true socially. So it might take a while for game clubs and that to reestablish themselves. But when they do, I think something like Adventurers League will be able to do well. So I think they've done well in that. I'm reminded, again, parallels in lifting and gaming. So our guys, starting strength, basic barbell training, Mark Ripito, guy from Wichita Falls, North Texas. And then there's CrossFit, and early on he was associated with CrossFit and then split up with them, and then lots of arguments with them and arguments about what the right style of training with it. And the best comment he made on that, I felt, was that he said, our argument with CrossFit has always been a family argument. So they're doing something different to us, but we're still family, really. We're still related. We're still close. Ultimately, we want the same thing. Ultimately, starting strength, CrossFit, we both want people to get stronger and fitter and healthier and to live better lives and preferably do it in a social sort of way. We just argue about how we should do it best. And so I think as much as anyone can rubbish Wizards of the Coast or D&D 5th edition or even truly awful games, ultimately we want the same thing. People to sit around a game table and share snacks and talk bollocks and have a laugh and have fun and have some adventures. Ultimately, it's a family argument. We're still family.
Yeah. I mean, there's belligerent relatives who, they're gonna show up to Thanksgiving wearing a t-shirt with a big red hammer and sickle on the front, and groan loudly when you say grace. But what can you do? What can you do? Speaking of families and lunatics, did you see this? You sent me this something from Dragon's Foot here about playing Temple of Elemental Evil.
Yeah, he said my PCs have become distracted with other quests and adventures, and have only made one foray into the temple. In terms of game time, it's been 2 months since the PCs did anything TOE related. I know the cults is stronger over time, but they also fight each other. Any suggestions what impact, if any, they would have on the surroundings? At what point do they make their presence publicly known? Tempted to have Homlet taken over one day when the PCs return, but I don't think 2 months is enough time for something that extreme. So I think this raises a general question of what happens when players ignore the main quest. My solution is that I never have a planned main quest. I never use modules and stuff. I think, anyone who plays these games will, we often find that the side quests are much more interesting than the main quest. The main quest is a bit railroady. The side quests let you explore the world and meet different characters and stuff, and monsters and stuff. So side quests tend to be a bit more interesting. So I just have side quests, and whichever one the players stick to long enough becomes the main quest. But yeah, I don't know. Bill?
My current, in its 5th year AD&D game, is it 5? No. Well, the current campaign is going to be in its 5th year soon. Started out as, look, not everybody can make it, so we're not going to play the characters, and we're doing the Slave Lords, the second Slave Lords module. We paused that. We rolled up some ad hoc characters, and that is now the ongoing campaign. That side campaign has been going for 5 years, and it shows no sign of stopping. Nobody has said, hey, can we set aside our 7th and 8th and 9th level characters and go back to those 3rd and 4th level guys playing the Slavers modules? But I am very hesitant to compare, to answer this question, to give this a good, well thought answer. I am loath to compare a scripted novel, no matter how good it is, to how a D&D game could unfold. But to a case like this, to this DM, or any of you out there who might go, yeah, what about Scarecrow's brain? And wonder what all this is about and what you should do with your party. Think about the end of the Lord of the Rings. Not the very end of the Lord of the Rings. I'm not saying, Sam kissed Rosie. Well, I'm home again. No, go back a little further than that. After the fall of Barad-dûr, after the many meetings and accolades and so on, and healings and resting in Minas Tirith, when the hobbits and basically the 9, not counting Aragorn, journey out again, eventually somewhere in the wilder lands, who do they run into? Saruman. And, they exchange some nasty words, but they won't kill him. They just kind of laughed at him, and they go on, and Saruman goes on his way. So they continue on. They go to Rivendell. They go to Bree. They have a fine time. And then when just the hobbits leave to go back to Hobbiton, of course, they find that the Shire has been turned upside down. Now, the Shire had started getting turned upside down just a couple of months after they left because of Saruman's agents. But things really went downhill in just a couple of months after Saruman went to Hobbiton while the hobbits were off visiting everybody that they hadn't had a chance to say more than hello and goodbye to during their journey to Mordor and other locations. So, yeah, if the party decides to go to Bree and have a few extra beers with Barlaman and catch up with Elrond in Rivendell and, stop and smell the flowers, literally, then by the time they get back around to Hobbiton, Saruman would have gotten his hooks in. And in the case of the Temple of Elemental Evil, if they wander off, even Hedrak and all the rest of those a-holes in the temple have got to be smart enough to realize now's our time to strike. Because when they come back, they might be coming back with more force. We need to fortify. We need to take away their safe spot. We need to take away Hamlet, and we need to fortify Nulb, and we need to reman the moat house. I would not have evil rest on their laurels. If the party goes away, even if you as the DM have made whatever they're doing as the main quest, don't let them just turn back around like they just pressed the pause button in that dungeon and nothing's gone on. Oh, they're the gnolls we slew 2 months ago. Exactly where we left them. Here, we kicked in this door and we knocked over that table, and here's a no. They should come back to a scouring of the Shire type situation, except it's going to be a hell of a lot harder when they come back. That is my take on it. That's my
that's fair. They may pursue a side quest and make it their main quest, but that doesn't mean the rest of the world just statically, passively waits around and does nothing in the meantime.
Yeah, keep your world alive, keep it living and breathing. Even if you just like somebody, if the party comes back to the city of Greyhawk and you've forgotten about Feanorth the Filcher, and they say, yeah, what's going on with Feanorth the Filcher? Even if you have to improvise something right on the spot, don't say, he's standing right on the corner where he was when you left 2 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the sort of dumb thing that you get in computer games where, your character has gone and, like, saved the entire city from a dragon or something, and then you still get some guard mouthing off and telling you to bugger off. And like, excuse me, some respect here. Like, I'm 32nd level. And I saved this town multiple times. It doesn't change things, and that's just laziness on the part of the game writers there.
Yeah, you bump into Nazim, bumping into Nazim in Whiterun when you're wearing like Daedric demonic armor, that's powered by souls you've trapped inside it, and you don't really so much walk on the ground anymore as glide on little clouds of fire, and you bump into him, and he says the same stupid thing he always says. Tell me, do you get to the Cloud District very often? What am I saying? Of course you don't. Really? Beth Soft,
it's just lazy writing.
It is
lazy writing from those guys.
It is.
So, they spend a couple $100 million making a game. They could at least put in some extra voice acting.
Yeah. So it is what it is. Computer games versus real games. It's like Gary once said to me, why do computer role-playing games have the word role in them? They're just computer games. Who are you playing a role to? When you're playing Diablo? Who you're playing a role to when you're playing The Bard's Tale? Now, granted, if you're playing something like EverQuest or World of Warcraft, there are servers, independent instances where role play is on. They expect you to act like the character that you're portraying on screen, but those are few and far between. So yeah, I think the best you can hope for is an atmospheric first-person game that immerses you in the world, but you're not getting any role playing out of it. But they could do better to make that immersion. Like, this is a meme. You can look this up online, but at many places in Skyrim, you can get actual gold ingots, not gold coins, but gold ingots. There's a beggar woman in one of the cities, and she always says, "Please, sir, for a simple gold coin, I could eat for another day." And you can give her a coin, and it gives you a small boon that lasts like a couple of hours in game. Well, somebody took. You get to a point in open world games where money is literally no object. Just spend as much as you want, pay whatever fines, bribe whoever you need to. It's just turned to stop yourself doing that. You literally have to throw money away, like go to a remote spot and throw it on the ground, and it will eventually despawn. So somebody went to this woman and, using the gold bricks and very careful placement, built a house around her out of gold bricks. But when you interact with her, please, sir, can you spare a gold coin I could eat for just one more day?
And you can't just give her a gold brick either.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, here's a loaf of bread sized gold brick. You're now richer than 9/10 of the people in this city. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
she
go
just
buy yourself a house and all the bread you want.
maybe she's like one of those homeless people in big cities who just have like drug and mental problems. And it's like, if you gave them $1 million, they'd be broke.
It doesn't matter. You just go to the local temple and you give them $1 million or the gold brick and say, look after that woman.
Yeah. Doesn't NTRPG? I think NTRPG starts tomorrow. James says he hasn't made a real con yet. James, did you get to GWOC? Did you get to the Great Underground Online Gaming Convention? Because guess what? It's a little early to talk about it. We are doing it next year. It's online. But I consider it as much of a real con as we could. We had merch. We had panels. We had an artist alley.
Yeah, my coffee mug is on its way down here.
Woohoo!
It might take a month or two, but make its way down here.
Good.
Well, we covered quite some ground today, from Pokemon to the Church of Satan not being a real church. So we even talked about role-playing games.
We did. We will do that from time to time. But yeah, no, I had a good time this evening. And again, I want to apologize because I know a lot of people tune in and a lot of people like to watch the AD&D live stream. Yesterday was just, it was not good. It was not good, but I'm not going to dwell on it. Things can only get better from there. Let me just say that. I had
assumed that you were still busy remodeling, because you seem to have done a good job so far.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I moved some stuff around. I got a lot of crap off the floors. It's still not exactly where I wanted in terms of being complete. This was someone in our little borough here got very insistent about some trees that were on my property. And so I got a lovely little letter that said, you have until June 1st to remove these, or we're going to have to come up with other ways to motivate you. So yesterday I was out in the heat.
Can you still go down to the hardware store and buy some TNT or gelignite? Yeah, because you could like drill a hole in the tree and then,
I
would didn't say how you should.
Yeah, they're close enough to my property that I have probably damaged the house some, but no. So yeah, basically, I was out at 10 at night, like night, like the sun is down, pitch black, but with the floodlight from the garage and the porch light to guide me, cutting limbs and hacking down stuff. It was not pleasant, and I hated every goddamn minute of it, but I got it. So anyway, that was what scuppered me yesterday. Assuming those people are pleased with the progress I have made, I'll be back tomorrow evening with a live stream, and tomorrow at some point, a video in which I talk about Stranger Things, a short one, not a live stream. And then Friday, a return to flight, Gamma World. We will be playing some Gamma World on Friday night. And at some point during all that, we're going to reboot talking about A1 Sleep Pits of the Undercity as our deep dive into the Slaver series. So all that is happening, and then we'll roll it right over into next week, where hopefully nothing terrible will happen. And then we'll move on to just on through the weeks. And Kyle, you'll be back next Wednesday, yes?
That's all right.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. So remember always, if there's any classic D&D or classic nouveau topic about role-playing games you'd like us to cover, any questions you've got, you can always ask us over in the comments over there. They're just on the other side of Kyle. Or you can leave us a comment on the Discord, or you can comment in the community comments or on YouTube. And if you're just driving by and you're not familiar with this channel, you don't know what the heck we're talking about, please consider clicking that. We don't either. Please consider clicking that subscribe button and the bell icon for notifications. It really helps us out. And even though I didn't have the grifting banner, as it's been called by some people, up yet, I do want to thank those who contribute to the grift. So thank you to Joshua Garlock, Lord Corion, Ricky Maru, Mobius, Kevin Reynolds, Doomsword, Mark Simpson, Damien 247, James F. Keck, William Smith, the Dungeon Minister, Manny Wall, Mark Corey, Kevin Wood, Todd Sharp, Carnivore Farmer, Rob Can't Say That You List, Jeremy Rule, Bo Ganora, Mikey Mank, and Sky Hernstrom. We absolutely appreciate your contributions to the show.
We do.
We certainly do. So thank you again, everyone. We had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. I know Kyle had a lot of fun. So here we will leave with you and bid you good evening. Take care, everyone. Peace.
Toodaloo.